I'm Madge. And yeah, I'm the woman who canceled her own mother's birthday party after she kicked me out of the house. But here's what nobody tells you. It wasn't just about that one night. It was years of quiet digs, of being told I was never enough, of planning a party I wasn't even invited to. You ever wonder what it feels like when your own family pushes you so far that you finally push back? Well, that's what happened to me. The sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds that morning, casting long stripes across my kitchen counter. I was halfway through arranging peonies in a vase when my phone vibrated, Miranda's name flashing on the screen. My stomach tightened before I even picked up. Calls from my mother rarely came without strings attached. "Madge," she greeted. Her tone clipped, but sweetened just enough to sound civil. "I need you to make a small adjustment to the invitations." I wiped my damp hands on a dish towel. "What adjustment?" There was a pause. Then, like she was asking me to fix a typo, she said, "Remove your name. No need to list yourself as the host. It's unnecessary." My chest tightened. I blinked at the flowers in front of me, the ones I'd ordered weeks ago specifically to match the event theme. "I thought I was hosting." "Well, technically, yes. But it's my birthday, darling. People expect me to be the host, not you." She let out a soft laugh, the kind she used when she wanted to make something sting without sounding mean. "It's just optics." I stood there, listening to her voice drift casually through the phone like she wasn't cutting me out of my own effort. "You still want me to cover the expenses, right?" "Of course," she replied instantly, as if that part had never been up for discussion. "You're so good with these things. I wouldn't trust anyone else." That was my mother, the kind of woman who could gut you in one breath and praise you in the next. She didn't even wait for my answer before moving on to details about the color scheme. After we hung up, I stared at the call log, the weight of her request sinking in. She hadn't asked. She had told me. Later that afternoon, I sat at my laptop, the soft hum of the cafe in Asheville filling the background. I stared at the invitation template on my screen, my name already printed in elegant cursive at the bottom, hosted by Madge Marlowe. I hovered over the text, cursor blinking like it was daring me. My thumb ran across my phone screen absently as Miranda's words played on loop in my head. "It's just optics." I highlighted my name and hit delete. The space looked emptier than it should have. Not just blank, hollow. I knew better than to be surprised. This wasn't new. Growing up in Charleston, it had always been that way. I was the afterthought, the piece that never quite fit. Back when I was 8, I spent weeks painting a handmade card for her birthday. I remember how she glanced at it, smiled politely, then moved on to the silver bracelet my brother Grant gave her, the one our father obviously bought. That card ended up in the trash before the week was over. Years later, when I graduated top of my class at Clemson, she told me over dinner, "That's lovely, Madge. But you know, nobody really cares about a florist degree. Except I hadn't majored in floral design. I'd studied business and marketing, put myself through school, built a successful flower shop in Asheville from scratch. But to her, I was always playing dress-up. A hobbyist, never serious enough." I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, the chatter of other customers around me blurring into static. A couple near the window laughed over their coffee. 2 women behind me discussed PTA drama. All I could hear was my mother's voice saying, "It's unnecessary." That night, after I finished closing up the shop, I sat in my living room with a glass of cheap red wine. The air outside had turned chilly, spring still fighting off the last edge of winter. I opened my laptop again and pulled up the finalized invitation. It was all there. The date, the venue in downtown Charleston, the RSVP number, the delicate floral design I'd worked on for weeks. Except now, my name wasn't. I stared at that empty space until the screen blurred. Somewhere deep inside me, something small and fragile cracked. For years, I'd told myself I could handle her. that this was just how Miranda Marlowe was. But that night, staring at that blank space, I finally asked myself a question I hadn't dared to voice before. When did I become a guest in my own family? The afternoon sun cut through my windshield as I pulled up in front of my parents' house on King Street. Charleston in April looked like a postcard. Azaleas blooming loud and bright, the air thick with spring. I sat there longer than I should have, fingers tapping the steering wheel, half tempted to turn back to Asheville. But I knew better. In my family, absence wasn't forgiven. It was used against you. By the time I rang the doorbell, it was almost noon. I heard voices behind the heavy oak door, laughter mixed with the clink of dishes. Miranda answered, smiling the way she always did when she wanted to look like the perfect Southern hostess. "Madge," she said, scanning me like I might show up cracked. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, forcing a smile. Inside, the dining room smelled like roasted chicken and garlic bread. The table was set, sweet tea and wine already poured. My father sat at the head, as silent as ever. Grant and Becca chatted politely with Aunt Janice, their smiles a little too careful. Miranda waved me toward a chair at the far end. "Sit, dear, just in time." The conversation slid over small talk. The weather, local politics, Becca's latest charity project. When I offered a simple suggestion about the party plans, Miranda's smile tightened. "We've got it handled, darling. Don't worry your head." It stung, but I let it go. I always let it go. Lunch unfolded like every family gathering. Polished, polite, with tension humming just below the surface. And then, halfway through dessert, my mother leaned back, wine glass in hand, voice light as air. "You know," she said to Aunt Janice, "I always thought Grant would be the one who couldn't settle down. But here he is, married, 2 kids, and Madge," she smiled sweetly at me. "Some people just can't keep a marriage." The words hit like a slap. No one looked at me. Not Grant, not Becca. My father stared at his plate like he hadn't heard. Aunt Janice gave an awkward laugh, but my mother kept going. "Madge always had trouble committing. She gets it from Robert's side." I smiled politely, like nothing had happened, like the tight knot in my chest wasn't choking me. When lunch finally ended, I slipped toward the hallway, needing air. That's when I heard them. Grant's voice, low, speaking to Becca. "After the meeting tomorrow, we'll finalize everything." Becca's voice answered, soft. "Do you think Madge will make a fuss when she finds out?" Grant's reply was flat. "We didn't invite her. Mom doesn't want her complicating things." The words hit harder than they should have. A meeting, finalizing something, and I wasn't even considered. Of course. By the time I walked back in, the conversation had moved on. Weather, local elections, no one noticed me. Half an hour later, I slipped out quietly. No one stopped me. The drive back to Asheville felt heavier than usual. The radio played, but I wasn't listening. My mind kept circling, replaying every slight, every offhanded dismissal. This wasn't about an invitation. It never had been. It was about being the one on the outside. Always. That afternoon, as the highway stretched ahead of me, something cold settled in my chest. I thought I'd already lived through the worst. I was wrong. Nothing could have prepared me for what I'd find when I came back the next weekend. The week after that Sunday lunch dragged on like wet clothes clinging to my skin. Every day, I told myself I'd stop thinking about what I'd overheard, that meeting I wasn't invited to, the casual cruelty in my brother's voice. But by Friday, the ache in my chest hadn't dulled. I needed answers. Or maybe I just needed confirmation of what I already suspected. So that Saturday, I packed an overnight bag and made the 3-hour drive back to Charleston, telling myself it was just to finalize party arrangements. That was the excuse anyway. The drive felt longer this time, the miles stretching like rubber bands ready to snap. When I arrived late in the afternoon, the sky over the city was soft and gray, spring's warmth still hanging in the air. My mother opened the door with her usual stiff smile. "You're early," she said, stepping aside. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." I thought I'd help finalize some details, I replied, my voice even, careful. There's still a lot to do. She gave a short nod, already turning away. Suit yourself. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon polish and lavender, the scent of my childhood. But something felt off the moment I crossed the threshold. A coldness, sharper than the air conditioning humming in the background. Grant and Becca were in the living room, scrolling on their phones. They glanced up, offered polite smiles, and returned to their screens without a word. The same quiet tension from last weekend wrapped itself around the walls, pressing in on me. "Your room's upstairs," my mother called over her shoulder as she disappeared into the kitchen. I carried my bag up the staircase, the wood creaking beneath my feet, familiar and hollow at once. When I pushed open the door to my old bedroom, I stopped dead. The posters I'd kept since high school were gone. My bookshelf, once cluttered with paperbacks and journals, had been emptied. The bedspread was different, blue and gray, patterned with dinosaurs. In the corner sat a small suitcase and a pile of toys. At first, I thought I'd opened the wrong door. Then, I saw the photo on the nightstand. Grant's youngest son, smiling in a soccer uniform. My throat tightened. Downstairs, I found Miranda fussing over a vase of lilies in the kitchen. "What happened to my room?" I asked, my voice brittle. She didn't look up. "We converted it. Grant's kids need space when they visit." "You didn't think to tell me?" She finally met my gaze, eyes cool and dismissive. "You don't live here anymore, Madge. It's just a room." Just a room. I swallowed the sting in her words and nodded, turning away before she could see the way my shoulders slumped. That evening, we sat around the kitchen table, reviewing the party menu. Or rather, she reviewed it while I listened. I tried to offer suggestions, a better appetizer option, maybe changing the wine selection, but every time, she waved me off. "Madge, darling, I appreciate your enthusiasm," she said at one point, glancing at Becca, who barely hid her smirk. "But you wouldn't understand what makes an event sophisticated. Trust me." Her voice was light, but the edges cut deep. Later that night, after the discussion dwindled and Grant and Becca disappeared to the guest room, I slipped out to the backyard. The evening air smelled faintly of grass and jasmine. I sat on the worn porch steps, staring up at the night sky, peeking through the trees. It wasn't about the room. It wasn't about the party. It was the way my mother had always found ways to make me smaller, to shrink me down until there was no space left for me. Growing up, I tried everything to earn her approval. Good grades, piano recitals, a stable business. But no matter what I did, I was never enough. Not like Grant, not like anyone else. That night, as the crickets chirped in the distance and the Charleston breeze brushed against my skin, I felt something in me harden. I told myself it couldn't get worse, but I was wrong. The real fracture was coming, and I never saw it coming. The next weekend arrived under a heavy sky. Charleston's spring had shifted, the air thick with moisture, clouds sagging low like they were too tired to hold themselves up. Rain tapped steadily against the windshield as I parked outside my parents' house again, the wipers on my car fighting to keep up. I hadn't planned on coming back so soon. After what happened last time, I told myself I'd stay away. But Miranda had called midweek, her voice syrupy sweet, asking if I could just swing by to help with the final vendor confirmations. And like a fool, I had said yes. By late Saturday afternoon, the rain hadn't let up. The house felt colder this time, like the damp air had soaked into the walls. Inside, everything looked the same. The pristine kitchen, the stiff-backed dining chairs, the vase of lilies, always sitting just so on the counter. But it felt heavier, like walking into a room right after an argument. "Don't forget to check with the florist," my mother said, without looking at me as I set my overnight bag by the stairs. "They keep confusing the arrangement colors." I nodded, even though I'd already emailed them twice this week. Becca sat at the breakfast bar, scrolling on her phone. When I greeted her, she barely looked up. The weekend dragged like wet clothes clinging to my skin. Every suggestion I made about the party, the menu, the playlist, even the lighting, was quietly overridden by my mother. "I already spoke to the caterer," she'd say. Or, "Becca has a better idea." By Saturday night, I was running on fumes. After dinner, I excused myself under the pretense of checking the vendor list one more time. But really, I just needed space. The rain had softened into a steady drizzle as I wandered back toward the kitchen to grab tea before bed. That's when I heard it. Their voices, low, conspiratorial, leaking through the half-closed door. "She's always been a burden," Miranda was saying. Her voice had that same polished, cutting edge she used at church luncheons when talking about people she pitied. "Everything is so difficult around her." I froze, fingers tightening around the doorframe. "She's exhausting," my mother continued. "The emotions, the drama. I told Becca to keep an eye on her. God knows she could mess up the party." Becca's voice followed, soft but clear. "I'll make sure she stays in line." A sharp crack split through me, like glass fracturing in slow motion. I stepped back quietly, careful not to let the floorboards creak. My chest felt too tight, like I couldn't get enough air. In that moment, something fell into place. Not a new wound, no. This wasn't new. It was confirmation of something I'd felt my entire life, but had never been allowed to name. I wasn't the daughter. I was the problem. The rain hit harder against the windows as I slipped out the back door, unnoticed. The night air smelled like wet grass and pavement. I walked to the edge of the backyard, past the old swing set my father had built decades ago, until the porch light blurred behind me. I stood there, letting the rain dampen my hair, staring at the fence like it held all the answers I'd been searching for since childhood. I thought about every time I'd been told I was too much, too sensitive, too opinionated, too difficult. And now, at 37, I finally heard it spelled out plain. I was a burden. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat by the guest room window, listening to the rain tap against the glass like 1,000 tiny drums. In my mind, I started making lists. Names, vendors, contracts, every thread of this party that was tied to me. And for the first time, I let myself imagine what would happen if I stopped trying to please her. That night, as the rain tapped against the window, I realized something terrifying. I was finally done being the daughter she wanted me to be. The rain had stopped by the time I left Charleston the weekend before. But the storm inside me hadn't. For the next few days, I went through the motions in Asheville, managing my flower shop, chatting with Tanya over morning coffee. But my mind kept drifting back to that night, to those words I couldn't unhear. Burden, exhausting, too much. By mid-May, the countdown to Miranda's birthday party was officially 2 weeks. I'd convinced myself I could still see it through, tie a neat bow on the whole mess before walking away for good. That Saturday, I arrived at my parents' house earlier than usual, the late spring humidity already clinging to the air. I parked in the same spot on the driveway, heart sinking as I noticed how full the street was. The rental van from the caterer, the florist's delivery truck, and 2 unfamiliar cars. Something felt off. Inside, the house was buzzing with activity. I barely had time to set my bag down before I noticed it. The tablecloths in the dining room were navy blue, not the soft ivory I'd spent hours picking. The floral centerpieces were oversized and gaudy, nothing like the minimalist arrangements I'd designed. Even the layout of the tables had been changed, chairs crammed close together without the breathing space I'd requested. I stopped one of the caterers as they walked past. "What's going on? These aren't the linens I ordered." She glanced at me, confused. "Your mother said you changed your mind." My stomach turned. I walked to the living room, heart pounding harder with each step. Miranda was there, standing by the fireplace, directing one of the florists like a general overseeing troops. When she saw me, she barely smiled. "You're here," she said, like I was late. "We made a few changes, nothing major." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "You changed everything without telling me." Miranda waved a hand. "Don't be dramatic, Madge. You always overcomplicate things. I fixed it." I felt the heat rise in my chest, my hands clenching at my sides. You didn't fix it. You undermined me. She turned, finally facing me, eyes sharp. Oh, honey, don't make this about you. This party is bigger than your little event planning hobby. My breath caught. Hobby. As if I hadn't built my business from scratch, spent years making other people's events flawless, while my own family treated me like a liability. I glanced around the room. Grant and Becca stood near the kitchen, pretending not to watch, but I could see the tension in their shoulders. I took a step closer to my mother, voice low but firm. This is the last time, Miranda. If you keep treating me like this, like I don't matter, like everything I do is a joke, I will walk away. Her smile was razor sharp. Don't be ridiculous. You'll do what you always do. You'll fall in line. The words hit harder than I expected, but this time, they didn't knock me down. They lit something inside me. I turned without another word and left the room, the weight of everyone's gaze trailing behind me. That night, I sat on the guest room bed, phone in hand, texting Tanya. Me. If I disappear before the party, don't be surprised. Her reply came a minute later. Tanya, you okay? I stared at the screen, then typed back. Me. Not yet. But I will be. I put the phone down and opened my laptop, pulling up my contracts, vendor lists, payment receipts. Every string holding this party together ran through me. And now, for the first time, I was ready to cut them. As I walked away from the kitchen that night, something in me shifted. I knew I was done warning her. The following week crawled by like a weight I couldn't shake off. I returned to Asheville after that last confrontation, opened my shop, smiled at customers, but every smile felt forced, brittle. My phone buzzed daily with updates from vendors, final confirmations, invoices, delivery times. I answered every message, checked every detail, but in the back of my mind, I kept replaying her words. You'll do what you always do, fall in line. By Friday afternoon, 1 week before the party, I knew I couldn't stay away. Not yet. Not without seeing how far she'd go. The sun bore down hard that day, heavy and suffocating. Charleston's air felt thick enough to choke me when I arrived at the house. Inside, the tension hit me like a wall. My father sat in the living room, pretending to read the paper. Grant and Becca hovered near the kitchen island, speaking in low tones. No one looked up when I walked in. I headed straight to the dining room, determined to check the final setup one more time. And there it was, again. The table placements were different, the flower arrangements overdone, nothing like the sleek, simple designs I'd finalized. Even the playlist notes I'd left on the counter were gone, replaced by a scribbled list in my mother's handwriting. I turned sharply toward the kitchen. Miranda stood by the stove, stirring something with unnecessary force. "Mom!" I called, keeping my voice steady. "Can we talk?" She didn't look up. "If it's about the party, I've already made a few adjustments." I swallowed back the heat rising in my throat. "You changed everything. Again! Without telling me." She finally met my eyes, her smile tight. "Madge, darling, it's my party. You make everything so complicated. I simplified it." I took a slow breath, willing myself not to explode. "You don't get to erase my work. You don't get to treat me like I'm a problem to be fixed." Her smile vanished, replaced by something sharper. "Oh, honey, you've always been the problem." The room fell quiet. Grant and Becca froze by the sink. My father looked up from his paper, but said nothing. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. "I'm warning you," I said quietly, voice shaking despite my effort. "If you keep treating me like this, I won't stay." She snorted, waving me off like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "This is my house, my party. If you can't act like a guest, you can leave." Her words sliced clean through me. She wasn't just dismissing me, she was throwing me out. "I'm serious," I said, my voice breaking despite myself. She crossed her arms, eyes cold. "I am too. You want to act like an outsider? Fine. You don't belong here anyway." No one said a word. Not Grant, not Becca, not my father. I stood there a moment longer, waiting for someone, anyone, to step in, to tell her she was out of line. No one did. So I walked out. The front door clicked shut behind me, like the final nail in a coffin. I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel, hands trembling. The humid air felt thick, suffocating. I could barely breathe. I unlocked my phone, pulled up the party schedule, and hit delete. Every file, every folder, every document, gone. For years I'd let her silence me, let her shape me into something smaller, more palatable. But that night, sitting alone in my car, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. As I drove away from the house that night, the question wasn't whether I would walk away. It was how far I was willing to go. The road back to Asheville stretched endlessly beneath my headlights. The storm that had hovered all afternoon finally broke somewhere around Somerville, fat drops of rain splattering against the windshield like pebbles. My phone lay on the passenger seat, dark and silent, but I kept glancing at it, my stomach twisted in knots. Somewhere between mile marker 83 and the county line, I finally reached for it. My hands still shook a little as I typed the first message. Me to Dad. I didn't deserve that tonight. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then tapped out another. Me to Grant. Do you really think I ruined everything? I didn't expect them to answer right away, but I needed to send it, needed to put the question out there. The rain poured harder as I drove the last stretch home. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, the clock on my dashboard blinked 11:46 p.m. The storm hadn't let up. I sat there for a moment, watching the water slide down the glass like the years slipping past me. My phone buzzed just after midnight. It was Dad, Robert Marlowe. Your mother had a bad day, just let it go. A bad day. I let the message sit there on the screen, the words burning brighter than the glow of the dashboard. By morning, Grant's reply arrived. Grant Marlowe. It's best not to escalate things. You know how she gets. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just silence wrapped in caution. Becca never replied at all. The weight of their messages settled on me like wet cement. Not one person in that house thought what happened was wrong. Not one of them had thought to say, "You didn't deserve that." It wasn't just my mother anymore. It was all of them. By noon, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, streaking the window of my living room. I sat on the couch, phone in one hand, the other resting over my knee as I stared at the conversation threads. I scrolled back through old texts, birthday wishes, check-ins, holiday plans, all of them polite, distant, transactional. Not one message where they asked how I was really doing. Not one where they told me they were proud of me. The realization settled sharp and bitter in my chest. It had never been about the party. It had never even been about Miranda. It was about the fact that, when push came to shove, no one in my family would choose me. I set the phone down and opened my laptop. My event planning software blinked to life, the dashboard clean and empty now that I'd deleted the party schedule. But the vendor contracts were still there. All of them. I clicked open the folder marked Miranda 65th, scanning the list of services. Venue, catering, florist, live band, valet service, photographer. Every single one tied to my business account. I began drafting emails. Calm, polite, professional. Instructions to release reservations. Requests for refund processing. Notices of cancellation clauses. It was almost frightening how easy it was. I'd done this 100 times before, just never for myself. By the time the morning sun hit my window, I had already decided, if they wanted me out of the family, I'd make sure they felt my absence. The morning sun poured into my apartment like nothing had happened. The sky above Asheville was clear, sharp blue. Birds chirped outside the window, and the soft hum of downtown traffic drifted up from the street. You wouldn't have known, looking at that peaceful sky, that I was about to dismantle a celebration 3 months in the making. I stood in my kitchen, stirring sugar into my coffee, methodical, calm. My laptop sat open on the counter. The folder was already there, waiting. Miranda, 65th, vendor contracts. One last sip, then I sat down. It took less than 10 minutes to cancel the caterer, 12 to contact the florist and rescind the order, 15 to revoke the booking for the band. Each email was polite, professional, and final. Please confirm cancellation and process the refund under our standard agreement. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we will no longer require your services. The venue was trickier. They'd require an immediate release of responsibility, a signed waiver. I signed it without hesitation. By the time the clock hit 11 a.m., the party no longer existed. I closed my laptop, stood up, and looked around the apartment. Everything felt quiet. Almost too quiet. Then the phone started ringing. First, it was a message from the florist. Miranda Marlowe is trying to reach you. She's asking about payment. Should we forward her the invoice? Then a missed call from the band. Your mother said you're still organizing. Can you clarify? Another email from the caterer. We need an alternative payment method, or we'll have to cancel the delivery. The dominoes fell faster than I could read. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Tanya texted, "Hey, are you okay?" Charleston's losing its mind. People are talking. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat back, letting the messages pile up like a growing storm. It didn't take long before the panic made its way back to Charleston society. First, a relative's post on Facebook. Anyone know why Miranda Marlowe's big birthday bash was called off? Heard the venue canceled. Then another. The party of the year? Suddenly not happening? Something's up. I knew how fast Charleston's social circles worked. News spread like spilled wine on linen. And Miranda? She fought back, of course. By late afternoon, her voicemail filled my inbox. Madge, this is childish. Call me back. We can fix this. Madge, don't be dramatic. Do you know how this looks? Madge, you're embarrassing the family. I didn't listen to the rest. Around 5 p.m., just as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, I sent one last message. Me to Miranda. You wanted me out. Now your party is out too. Happy birthday. I didn't expect a reply. I stared at the screen, waiting for something. Anger, guilt, relief. But all I felt was a hollow quiet settling in my chest. That night, I sat on my porch in Asheville, a glass of wine in hand, the spring air cool against my skin. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't suffocating. As I watched the storm, I had unleashed tear through my family. I wondered what would be left standing when the dust finally settled. A month passed quietly, like a wound healing beneath a bandage you don't dare peel back too soon. The chatter in Charleston hadn't died down. Word traveled fast in that town, faster than wildfire on dry brush. I heard from old classmates, vendors, even customers at my flower shop in Asheville. Did you really call off your mother's party? Was it true what they're saying, that you ruined it on purpose? People love a scandal, especially when it doesn't involve them. I didn't answer their questions. I simply kept arranging lilies and roses, cutting stems, tying ribbons, moving forward one bloom at a time. Back in Charleston, the dust hadn't settled well. The local society column ran a small, biting piece. Marquee birthday party for Miranda Marlowe. Abruptly canceled. Family drama rumored. I heard through Tanya that my mother was furious, embarrassed, and above all, unwilling to explain. She's telling everyone you had a breakdown, Tanya said over coffee one morning. I just smiled at that. Maybe I had. Maybe a breakdown is exactly what freedom looks like when you've spent your whole life swallowing yourself. My father never called. Neither did Grant. Becca, predictably, remained silent. Their absence spoke louder than words. By mid-June, the hydrangeas outside my apartment window had started to bloom, fat blue clusters catching the morning sun. And something inside me, quietly, steadily, had started to bloom too. I signed a lease for a new space, a bigger one, right on the corner of Lexington and Maine. Marlowe and Bloom, Asheville's full-service floral boutique. I spent the next weeks painting the walls, hanging shelves, unpacking boxes of ribbon and vases. Tanya showed up every weekend with coffee and takeout, rolling her eyes when I overthought the layout. "You don't need to make it perfect," she told me one Saturday afternoon, wiping sweat from her brow. "You already are." It wasn't until a Tuesday morning, about a month after the party that never happened, that the letter arrived. Plain white envelope, no return address, Charleston postmark. My heart clenched before I even opened it. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, my mother's handwriting sharp and neat as always. "I don't understand why you did what you did, but you're still my daughter. That hasn't changed. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just 6 cold lines written in a hand I'd spent my entire life trying to impress." I folded the letter neatly, placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, and closed it without a word. Weeks passed. The shop opened to good business. Locals stopped in for fresh-cut stems, couples for wedding consultations, children with crumpled dollar bills for a single daisy. Life moved forward. But some nights, when the store was quiet and the street outside empty, I'd catch myself wondering if that letter had been her version of an olive branch, or a chain trying to pull me back. The answer never mattered, because somewhere between deleting that party and unlocking the doors to my own store, I'd learned the truth. Freedom doesn't mean fixing what's broken. It means finally walking away from what was breaking you. And if you've stayed with me until the end of this story, maybe you're wondering, was it worth it? Burning everything down just to finally breathe? The truth is, sometimes freedom costs more than you ever imagined. Sometimes it looks nothing like forgiveness. It looks like finally learning how to choose yourself, even when no one else will. For too long, I thought family meant sacrifice without limits. That love meant shrinking myself to fit someone else's expectations. But here's what I've learned. You are not obligated to keep setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, especially not when they never asked if you were burning. If you're watching this right now and you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, like no matter how much you give, it's never enough, I hope my story reminds you of this. You are enough. You've always been enough. And the day you decide to stop begging for a seat at the table might just be the first day you finally taste freedom. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love? Not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally started loving yourself? Or maybe you're still standing at that crossroads, wondering if it's okay to choose peace over approval. Tell me in the comments. If this story touched something in you, drop a heart or simply type "I'm enough." Let me know where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't like this story, that's okay too. Tell me why. Let's talk about it. If you want to hear more real, raw stories like this about family, forgiveness, freedom, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.